Hello everyone, welcome back to the Wolfpack. Now today's video is going to be a little bit of a breakdown of the cost and the process of what goes behind a lifestyle photo shoot. In particular, what goes behind taking a photo like this and making a commercial like this. Now, the reason why I wanted to make today's video is because if you are an aspiring photographer yourself, aspiring videographer trying to push towards the board game niche, then at least you know what to expect in terms of cost, in terms of the process. Or if you are an independent publisher, maybe this is something that you might be able to figure out for yourself. Or if you are a publisher and you want to know behind the scenes of what goes into these very costly shoots, then this is going to be the video for you. So let's go ahead and start off by breaking down the cost, and then we'll talk about the process right after. On my shoots, I bring the following. I have 3 Canon R5s, which are $4,000 for each body. One is my main driver for photos. The second I'll keep around as a second angle, and the third camera will either go to my second shooter, or I also keep it on a gimbal. That way I don't have to set it up and balance it every single time, and it's ready to go. The number one lesson I learned very quickly and early on is that time is literally of the essence here, because every single second, minute that I spend wasting fiddling around with my camera gear, switching out lenses, changing out memory cards, all those little pockets of time are very costly. And you'll find out in a second that they cost like around $350 a minimum per hour for those times that I accumulate fiddling around with gear. So that's why I typically carry around 3 camera bodies to alleviate that cost. Now for lenses, my main lens that I use for pretty much everything is the Canon RF 28-70 f2.0. This is $3,200. My second lens is the Canon RF 15-28 f2.8. This is $2,500. I use this for more wide angle shots. And then my third lens for really tight shots or really close-up shots is $1,100. This is the Canon 100mm macro f2.8. And lastly, sometimes I do switch out with this other lens, and that is the 24-105 f4, and this one is $1,300. That lens is also a good one for my second shooters to have because it's just easier for them to use, especially if they're not trying to get into my way. So having a zoom lens and going further away out of the table is much easier for my second shooter to use as well. And now we've reached $20,100, and that is just the camera bodies and lenses. Let's keep going. Now next up is lighting, and the one I had originally actually just shattered, so I had to get this replaced. This is the FJ400 at $600. The wireless trigger, the remote itself, is $100. The beauty dish, which helps diffuse the light, is $300. And this is what I use for photos. When I transition over to video, I use the Aperture 120D, that's $900. The softbox is $219. And the stick, one that I have out of frame right now, and the one that's used to hold up a microphone, hold up the lights, that's $240 times 2. That's $480 for 2 sticks to hold up some lights. Now next up are accessories. Each of these batteries are $80 times 6, that's $480. Now these are also the ones that I had to buy myself. They did not come with the cameras. In order for me to last a day, I need around 4 to 5 batteries and then 6 just in case. These ridiculous CF Express cards, these are just memory cards, but they record premium quality footage like 4K 120. Each card is $140 times 4, that's $560 just to hold the footage. Now these other cards I typically use for photos. I'll usually use around 3 of them, $20 each for $60 total. And then this is a gimbal. You use this to stabilize video footage, and that is $450. All of these are my main drivers. And then lastly, we have a venue because I try to find new spots to rent for every shoot. They range between $100 to $175 per hour. Typical days will be 8 hours, so we'll do the low end, $800 plus $200 as a processing fee, plus $100 for cleaning. For the low end, like I said, so this will be $1,100 to rent for the day. Models, depending on the scale of the project, I try to pay as much as I can, but they range from $50 to $100 an hour. The more experienced ones will be $125 to $150 per hour. So let's say $50 times 8 hours times 4 models, that is $1,600. Plus breakfast and lunch will be another $150 for a 4-person group. Okay, now that is all related to equipment costs. Let's briefly talk about the process of taking a photo. So after the whole inquiry process, deposits, contracts, and all that, and we get to the point where I receive the game, usually it takes me about half a day to learn a game efficiently. Reason why it takes a little bit longer than what you would typically learn for like a game night in like a couple hours is because when you are learning the game for these shoots, you really have to know them like that. And reason why is because like I said earlier, every second that you spend, it adds up. So like when you're trying to figure out where certain pieces go, if you don't know which mechanics are played out in which sequence, it's gonna cost you, the photographer, to pay for these shoots instead, which actually happened for my first couple of shoots. I ended up paying in order to take their photos because I just didn't know how to like calculate everything. I didn't know how to account for different costs, and I was learning still at the time. So to circle back to that point, you really have to know the rulebook well in order to save yourself time and to save yourself costs in the end. Because again, the more time you fiddle around with the rulebook and try to like flip through the pages and figure out which components go where for the setup, and then that's gonna affect like your photoshopping time too. If you put like the wrong piece, which I've done before, in like the wrong spot, you have to Photoshop that out, or maybe you get to the point where you can't even use that photo. And that's really bad for the client end because then they lose out on the photo. So you really wanna avoid that, and to do so, you have to spend a lot of time learning the rulebooks and learning the game to the T. On top of that, that's just one part that you have to know for that day, which is learning the rules itself. And then you get to the sequence of events for photos. For me, I usually go through a typical gameplay. So I'll go through like, this is the first action you do on your turn, second action, third action, and then I go back and then go to all the nuances of each action. And I always think about like, okay, which parts can publishers use as graphic design elements and then keep empty space, negative space, so they can put text over it and say like, this is where the setup for this house goes, something like that. This also highly depends on the game's complexity. Like for Descent, for instance, that's a dungeon crawler, also has an app-based integration with it. So I have to know all the combat mechanics, I have to know the tablet and like figure out which buttons go where at which time, and also tell the models like how to play the game. So that's the second part you have to keep in mind, aside from the rules, which is the sequence of events. And then the third part you have to keep in mind is actually how to direct all of your models. If, let's say you have a group of 4 people, you have to tell every single person what they're doing, because if not, they're gonna ask a lot of questions like, what do I do with my right hand? What do I do with my left hand? Am I smiling? Am I laughing? Am I being serious? Am I looking over here? Am I looking over at this person? Am I drawing cards? Like, you have to keep all that in mind. Those 3 major components as you're going out throughout the day for an 8-hour day. It's a lot to take in. Don't get me wrong, I love doing this. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't love it and enjoy it as much as I do now. But I didn't realize how much went into it actually until people started asking me about it and breaking down the process. And on top of that, like when my second shooter, when I put her in charge for like 10-20 minutes to direct models and take photos, she was struggling a lot through it because of how many things you have to keep in mind. And I didn't realize that because it just kind of came second nature to me after practicing this for so long. So it's not to downplay, you know, her abilities or anything, or his abilities from my other second shooter, but it's more so like to put myself in perspective and realize that what I've been doing for quite some time now, and I'm used to it and I'm efficient with it. But if you think about the process as a whole, there's a lot of involvement across 3 major parts that is tough to keep in mind, which you should also think about too, because these photos are very deceptive in that you think that, oh, these are just a couple people playing games around the table. They're just holding cards and smiling at each other, super easy. But then you start realizing the cost of all the equipment, you start thinking about the model cost and the venue cost, and then you start thinking about how to actually stage every one of these photos. And that's just the photo side of things. Bottom line, it is a lot to take in. So hopefully the next time you're on social media and you see one of these photos, it'll make you think a little bit more about what goes into one of those. So that's what you have to keep in mind for photos. When you switch on over to video, I think video is a lot more complicated because now you have to think about your transitions. You have to think about your sequence chronologically for the video, which is not always the same as it would be for gameplay, because sometimes publishers will ask you to highlight different mechanics in a different order or highlight big action shots for a game. And then you as a videographer have to think about, are you going to pan right, pan left, zoom in, zoom out? When you're using a gimbal like this, there's a joystick here that you have to be very, very careful about and have to have very precise movements in order to make it as stable as possible. And imagine using this for like 6 to 8 hours a day and just going through, thinking about your entire sequences, thinking about the rules, and having all that in mind, while also being very precise on your camera controls and knowing your camera settings to the T. And the final kicker for all of this is that you as a photographer, you as the videographer, you cannot show these emotions because it's going to impact the rest of your shoot. You have to stay positive, you have to be happy, and you also have to hide the amount of stress levels when everyone's kind of like chit-chatting and talking and having fun, which they should do, which I highly encourage them to do, but you also have to bring them back on track so that way you don't waste too much time either at the venue. So in the end for video, I usually end with around 100 separate video clips of all the points that I've been talking about. And then for photos, I usually end around 1600. And then the process that I go through for photos is I go through a culling first, and I bring down the photos from 1600 to around 300. And then I cull them again, going through a second base layer, adding in different colors to see what matches for that venue and for the colors of the game that day. And that'll bring it down to around 100 photos. For round 3, I go through all the 100 photos and keep colors as consistent as possible because sometimes they change going from layer to layer. And then I add in highlights for the coins, the cards, or whatever my subject is, the game box, and make that stand out as much as I can. Round 4 is double checking all the photos, exporting them out. And then round 5 is once they are uploaded to a photo gallery, I go through them one by one to make sure everything looks good. Nothing needs photoshopping, no components are out of place, no weird hair strands or anything like that. And that is for photos. For videos, well, I have a ton of video editing breakdowns for my channel. That's pretty much what goes into all of these 15-30-second commercials as well. And I'll link a couple up here so you can see, and down there in case you want to see what it's like to edit video that goes into these commercial shoots. So with that said, I hope you all found this video helpful and insightful, whether you are a publisher looking to book these services, whether you are an aspiring photographer, or whether you're just interested in what goes behind one of these very, very high-end board game lifestyle shoots. Yes, it costs a lot, it's very time consuming to make, but at the end of the day, it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And it's really cool because I just started this whole service last year because I was trying to figure out how to elevate my lifestyle shoots with just hand pictures, how to make that, take it a step further. And then I started trying to find, a diverse cast of models, which I always talk about for all these shoots that I announce. And sometimes it's hard to find models too, because that's also a difficult point too, is just finding models. Luckily though, I am a part of different groups because I also do weddings too. So I have like a wedding group and a model group and a SoCal model group. So I usually will post something there like, hey, is anyone available this day and want to do some board game shoots? And it's different, and I usually don't get as many hits as like clothing brands or makeup products or like athletic gear and stuff, but we do what we can. But yeah, if you have any questions about the gear, leave them down in the comments below. Let me know what you all think about this breakdown video. And with that, I hope you all have a fantastic week, and I will see you all in the next one. There's no AC in my studio, so it is blistering hot, and I am sweating bullets because I can't have the window open either, or else you're gonna hear a bunch of lawn mowing and wind going on here. If you made it here to the end, comment one step further, because that is the mentality that we're doing for everything on this channel. One step further. That's how these lifestyle shoots came about.